Welcome to Strategy Talk, where the editors of Strategy Page discuss current events with a splash of history. I'm Dan Masterson, host of Strategy Talk. With me today is the editor of Strategy Page, well-known military author and game designer Jim Dunnigan. Also joining us is the associate editor of Strategy Page, columnist and author Austin Bay.
Welcome, Austin and Jim. Thought we'd talk a little bit about the diplomacy that's going on between Ukraine and the Russians. Jim, where does that stand right now?
Well, as of today or yesterday, the Russians report that the latest round of peace talks, I think they're in Istanbul, have failed. Russia refuses to give up the Crimea. They insist it's irrevocably part of Russia. They're less vocal about the Donbass and other areas. The Ukrainians want the Russians out completely. And the question is, who can last longer? Putin's in big trouble because he always based his power on his ability to stand up to Russia's enemies, to deal with Russia's enemies, and to basically improve the lives of the average Russian. Well, all that's happened since 2014 is basically life has gotten worse. As we reported in Strategy Page, the people living below the poverty line have increased year by year. Now it's going up even more because of the latest sanctions. The Russians are trying to strike back by demanding that their remaining gas and oil customers pay them in rubles, which would basically force them to pay whatever Russia demands for rubles, and that would basically increase their value of the ruble. So far, nobody seems to be going along with that. It just increases the resolve of the West European customers for Russian gas and oil to switch. Now, of course, they're going to have to make sacrifices. Fortunately, they're heading into the warm weather season, so they don't rely on the heating as much. And we're going to try Japan, as I mentioned last time. I think I already sent them a shipment of liquid natural gas. We're talking about sending them more, but we are somewhat constrained in our ability to get it out to them. Be that as it may, they have not indicated any indication, Germany or other West European powers, of giving in to Russian demands. So apparently, it's a death match, and Putin is in the weak position. The Europeans, especially the NATO allies that border Russia, the new ones that came in 2005, they're pointing out that if you don't defeat Russia in Ukraine, those NATO nations are going to be next. And if that happens, Article 5, the mutual self-defense portion of the NATO treaty is invoked, and bingo, we're at war. Now, Putin seems to be continuing to play poker, but he's basically got a very weak hand, and it gets weaker by the day. So it's anybody's guess exactly who's going to break first. I think if the Ukrainians, as they're doing, can cut off the Russian troops still in, or most of the Russian troops, some of them are extremely vulnerable, especially the ones around Kiev, from their supplies, and there is an even more ignominious retreat or surrender, mass surrender of Russian troops, Putin will have no cards left to play at all. So time will tell.
So, Austin, how do you see things?
Well, I'll approach this from a different angle. You have to begin with what are the audiences, and fancy word there, but what are the other nations that Ukraine has to communicate with and relies on their support. And let's use President Zelensky as a center point for it, because he's Ukraine's leader and chief spokesman. I would say his first audience, of course, is the Ukrainian people, but he's got their support, and they're his, and he's as articulate as he is. The fighting forces are making a statement, just as Jim said, a huge one, with not only ability to resist, but their ability to launch counterattacks. And the people themselves, I mean, some of the best some of the best representatives for Ukraine and its political and diplomatic situation are the refugees that move into Poland, all the mothers with their young children, and whether they speak English or they're going through a translator, what they have to say about their situation and how they express a will to resist. Yes, they miss their husbands and sons and fathers who are back fighting being a nation at arms back inside Ukraine, but they send that message globally, and it is very compelling for the quote unquote larger audiences, which is the European Union, NATO. The United States is still a very, very important. How the U.S. reacts and how much support the United States provides, both politically, economically, and militarily, simply because the United States we're the biggest power on the planet, and it's something China and Russia can bully their neighbors, but ultimately if their neighbors are backed by the United States, they run into a superior power, and the U.S. is a superior power. So that's, I think, to put all that together, Dan, in a very desperate situation, Ukraine has played its diplomatic portion of its of fighting this war. They've done very well with it. Everybody knows what I think of Erdogan. But Erdo has he's basking in the light of being a quote unquote mediator, but it's pretty clear. In fact, I've already written in my opinion on this that Turkey's solidly on Ukraine's side, because Erdo has been squeezed where hi, I'm running my own policy, and now when the bear attacks, that is suddenly Turkey is a NATO nation, as it should be. That's why, and I'm getting a little speculative here, but I don't think Russia sees Turkey as a neutral mediator, and I don't think they are. So there's Ukraine has a plus there. Now, Jim's talking about the clock running out on Putin. I agree with that. I agree with it that, as the column I wrote this week about Ukraine emerging as a warrior state, that was really a way to talk about the problem that Russia's aggression has created. Finland's a warrior state. Ukraine is demonstrated they are as well. They're going to resist. Now, doesn't have the economic wherewithal to fight an extended war. They had the ability to conduct a frozen war like they had in the Donbass or even in Crimea. As long as it's low level, they could sustain that. But Putin decided he was going to go for a near all-out conventional war. And as Jim and I discussed actually in a couple of recent strategy talks, it sure looks like he was betting on a blitzkrieg, on a quick victory, removal of Zelensky, either by assassination or having him flee, and then suddenly observe the great power of the Russian bear. Well, I think Jim said this in the last strategy talk. Not only has that not happened, it's backfired, and grave weaknesses in the Russian military and in Russian chain of command have been revealed by this stalled and in some cases utterly blunted offensive into Ukraine. And I'll just to draw this point to a conclusion. Jim was pointing out that some of the activities going on in the and the north with the counterattacks, which I described a few minutes ago as local. There's it appears, and again, we're having to go on the information we get out of open sources, but also relying on what we've seen historically and personal military experience. It looks like the Ukrainians, at least around Kiev, are in a position to surround some of these Russian units that are on the roads. And they have these axes of advance, and they're still road bound. And again, that gives them a huge bargaining chip, and it's a major loss for Putin. I'm a lot more wary, though, of the South, because you've seen what the Russians have done to Mariupol. They've solidified their position around the Crimean Peninsula. They haven't broken out. They took Kherson early on, but they hadn't broken out and driven to Odessa. I agreed on that. But if you'll recall, I think we had a strategy talk in January, or maybe it was early February, about Ukraine, where I said one of the Russians' goals is going to be to take Mariupol and have a land bridge from the Donbass. We're actually running from Russia all the way down to Crimea. And it looks to me like by hook or by crook, or by what one time jokingly called Zhukov tactics, you just level everything with artillery and then come in and claim that you've won a great victory. Is it that I think the Russians are going to pull that off? Now, how does that work diplomatically? That actually gives Putin a card to save face and say, see, I've united Crimea with the Russian motherland. Will Ukraine accept it? No. But then it's on the ground. Russia has the strength to defend it. And then you'd see the negotiations of what would happen with Donetsk and Luhansk, the rest of the Donbass, which one of the things the offensive has exposed, I think, and I'd like to hear Jim's comment on this, is there aren't very many Ukrainians, even ethnic Russian Ukrainians, and Donetsk and Luhansk, that want to be ruled by Russia. It was all a big fake anyway. Which is, if you really had a fair and open referendum about where you want to be, I think the Ukrainians win hands down. I don't mean like that referendum that the Russians had in 2014 in Crimea. So that's something where when Jim says that the Russians are in a bind, I'm making a guess there, Dan, but there's a ton of evidence of ethnic Russian resistance to Russian aggression. I'll leave it at that.
Jim, what do you think about that?
Well, a lot of the ethnic Russians who basically favored Russia have gone back to Russia since 2014 from the Donbass, and the ones left are basically stuck. They don't want to go to Russia. They can't get to Ukraine. Some did get to Ukraine. And they're just keeping their heads down, hoping it's going to be all over. Now, other thing to keep in mind is the offensive in the Russian offensive in the Donbass hasn't made much progress. They're still stalled. And of course, the Mariupol, the link from Russia, along the coast to Crimea is very vulnerable. And they've also got the Kerch Straits Bridge, which they built. I don't know what shape that's in now. I mean, it's vulnerable. You hit that, and bingo, there goes the road and rail connection the Russians built at great expense after they took over Crimea. And they also sank at least one Soviet amphibious ship that was landing. I forget where it was. Maybe it was near Odessa or whatever.
I think it's a port called Berdyansk or something like that.
Oh, right. It was either. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. They were bringing in supplies and troop reinforcements, and somehow the Ukrainians got a hold of an anti-ship missile, and they hit it. It blew up, and it set fires to several cargo ships, both next to it. So that put the fear of, their supply lines to the Russians. I think the big Russian vulnerability is the resolute, the fighting power of its troops and the ability to supply them. The Ukrainians seem to be concentrating on the supplies. They claim to have killed 17,000 Russian soldiers so far, and wounded at least twice as many. Russians only admit to 1,000, although they accidentally slipped with a 7,000 number before they took that off the website. The Russians may not even know because they don't get to retrieve a lot of the bodies, and a lot of injured Russian troops are captured. Now, I don't know if they're paying attention to the fact that the Ukrainians are identifying dead Russian troops. They have access to a facial recognition system that has combed basically the Russian version of Facebook. They have 2 million images there. But for living Russian soldiers, they can, if they want, they'll give a phone number. They'll call up and they'll let the Russian soldier say, "Hey, mom, dad, whatever. I'm okay. I'm a prisoner. I'm being well taken care of, et cetera, et cetera." They had that one incident where they got 12 of them to volunteer to be on a televised, TV, conference. Now, that was technically against the Geneva Convention, but these guys wanted to get the word out that, we're glad we surrendered. If we don't go back to Russia, so be it. It's no place to go back to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The worst possible propaganda. As Austin pointed out, the Russians have definitely lost the information war. We've reported on that several times in Strategy Page. The Russians also, Putin, underestimated the response of the West. Again, as Austin pointed out, we captured their strategic copies of their strategic plan. It's supposed to be over in 15 days with a new government replacing Zelensky, a pro-Russian government, which was going to declare, Ukraine part of Russia, and that was supposed to demoralize. But, again, you have a nation in arms, and the Russians haven't faced that before. They've had
Finland. They faced Finland.
Well, Finland, exactly. But now Finland is buying F-35s and wants to join NATO. So whatever Putin happened to achieve by invading Ukraine, it's all going in the opposite direction. Sweden is considering joining NATO. I mean, obviously, these countries use their neutrality to stay out of the bear's grasp. Finland, famously, since World War II, made agreements with Russia, which were based on Finland staying neutral. And Finland did stay neutral, of course. After 1991, especially after 2014, the Finns realized that there's no being neutral with Russia anymore. And so they have definitely, gone over to the mutual protection guarantees of the NATO agreement. And of course, the Eastern European NATO members, especially Poland, never tire of reminding the West that you said you'd help us in 1939 and you didn't come through. Mm-hmm. And of course, the European powers, especially Britain, they take that to heart. They said, yeah, we did kind of, screw the pooch in that situation. And they're in a situation now where they don't have to even consider that as a real possibility. The invaders are playing a weak hand. It's getting weaker. The Russians never expected the extent of the sanctions hitting them. And apparently the Europeans are digging in. No matter if the Russians, basically cut off the oil supplies and natural gas supplies, they're preparing for the worst. Now, some European countries depend entirely on the Russian natural gas. Austria was one, and a couple in the Balkans. I haven't been keeping track of what their position is, but they're even worse shape. The only thing everybody has going for them, the cold weather is over. It's going to be warm for the next 8 or 9 months. So there's some breathing room for the West to shore up the energy supplies for Western Europe in order to starve the Russians of revenue from that, because they're still able to collect. If they can, they get paid in euros, which they really have a hard time doing. They can launder them, but at a large discount. So it's still unresolved. But if I were a betting fellow, I'd bet on Ukraine. The Ukrainians are in a position of strength, and they seem to be playing on it. The Russians are in a weak position, and they're not really able to do anything to reinforce that position. For Putin, and Putin's apparently, there's hints that he's going to conduct a secret poll in Russia to get the true, will of the Russian people. Which even the communists kept track of. They used their informant network to poll, as it were, the population to see, how well they were responding to this or that. And so far, the last public poll gave Putin about 58%, I think, but 23% said no. We gained nothing from this war, and this was like almost a month ago. I suspect the numbers have gone much further against Putin, and he may use that excuse, a secret poll, to say, all right, the Russian people are opposed to this, and I can't support, etc. He's looking for a dignified way out. He's looking for a way out that will leave him in power, because if he is tossed out and maybe even prosecuted in Russia, he can't go into exile anywhere. Maybe Iran. But almost go into exile. I mean, the Iranians will sell you out if the price is right. So, I mean, he's a war criminal now, with his switch to attacks on civilians, like in Mariupol, and his the order a couple of weeks ago to allow looting. And there were a lot of lurid stories, usual lurid, plundering stories coming out. But it didn't save them. And the Russian troops still have to worry about lack of fuel, lack of gasoline, and lack of food.
So, Austin, I'd like you to comment on one thing before we wrap this all up. Is it's been speculated that Putin has been misinformed from day one, misinformed about the capabilities of the Russian military, and misinformed about what is going on internally with the attacks in Ukraine. Have you heard much about that?
Well, all right, Dan, I have. Let me quick some backstory on this. I've gotten blowback to my analysis, this has been an analysis of mine now for really 20 years, that Putin is obsessed about rebuilding the Soviet Union. I think, or the Russian Empire, really is the correct way to frame it. I think the evidence supports that. I'm not trying to be a psychologist on it, but I just see what he says, see what he does, and witness 2014 and 2022. So, but understand that there are other things. He's really making a statement about the alternatives to the liberal democratic model, just like Xi Jinping. So, but since I really think he's the driver on this, I don't think he wants to listen, Dan. And I think he's a very, as Condi Rice said, the thing that she remembered when he was dealing with him, when she thought he was rational, very hard man, a very cold man. And he doesn't seem to be as rational as he was when she had to deal with him 12, 14 years ago. But she was always impressed by that the sternness and the distance of a very hard personality. So I don't think he wants to hear. And what happens when you have a dictatorship? It's one of the weaknesses of dictatorship. You get yes men around you saying, yeah, we can do this. Yeah, we can do that. Why, of course, Vlad, our troops, they're all cracking. They're ready to go. And you keep spinning that. And then when you actually make the move, you find out that you're not ready. Now, Putin, of course, can say he was misled. I would be very surprised if Russian intelligence was as bad as it appears to be. I'd let Jim speculate on that, but I can't believe that they didn't have some solid appreciation of the will of the Ukrainian people. I guess it was one of those things that I'll believe it when I see it. Well, you're seeing it. You're seeing it. And you understand that it took a while for Stalin to figure out that the Finns were going to be that way. I guess they didn't think the Ukrainians will be that way. maybe they ought to think that there'll be a lot of people, and I hope this translates into over to Beijing. There might be some other people besides the Vietnamese on your borders that are going to resist you no matter what. So, has he been lied to? Yeah, it could be because the people wanted to save their scalps. Worst case, and this sounds novelistic. In other words, it's complete speculation. The Kremlin is this a big circle of self-reinforcing gossip. The sad thing is that Russia has the power to devastate, and they are devastating. And if get a mindset that, well, we'll just keep blowing them up until they're blown to smithereens, then we'll call it victory. But as Jim says, there are other clocks running, and that's so it's not a movie, Dan. There are a lot of moving pieces, but Putin's in a bind. I hope that answers your question.
We'll leave it at that. That's sort of the theme of today's talk is Putin's in a bind. I think I'll use that as our headline. Thanks. We're up on a time limit today, and we're out of time. So we will talk to you gentlemen next time.
Indeed.
Take care, guys. Bye. Bye-bye.